I want to start by saying the ICRC feels there is real urgency on this issue. We've been hearing that there's exponential change going on. These weapons are already in some forms being used. We think it's very important we concentrate on the weapons that are being used now or about to be used, rather than imagining a distant future and getting diverted that way. Therefore, we're urging states very much, and we're grateful for the support of India on this, to really bring governments together now to agree rules, principles, and if necessary to start developing international humanitarian law to cover the issues of these weapons. And ICRC's concern on this question and these weapons is the same as our concern is always. As the guardians of international humanitarian law, we have two main concerns. We want to make sure that all new weapons are compatible with international humanitarian law. And we also want to make sure that all new weapons avoid humanitarian consequences as much as possible. So I'm going to set the scene briefly and then talk about three aspects, as the ambassador said. I'm going to talk about legal aspects, the operational principles that we think need to be in place, and some ethical aspects. So if we set the scene now, we're aware in the ICRC of about 90 states who already have drone capability, about 28 states who have armed drone capability, and probably 9 states who are actively using this capability. And of course, we're also aware of non-state armed groups who are weaponizing commercial drones for their effect. So we see this as something we need to really get to grips with now. And if I start with the legal aspect, IHL and autonomous weapons. In Article 36 of the Additional Protocol 1, and I wouldn't be ICRC if I didn't quote from the conventions, it's quite clear that any new weapon must be designed with the ability to respect IHL, to respect the law, and be capable of operating with those laws. And that means that any of these weapons must be able to operate in line with the three main principles of IHL, which of course are distinction, proportionality, and precaution. So any of these new weapons needs to be capable to make judgments about distinction, proportionality, and precaution on the battlefields. And we feel that that kind of judgment, certainly at this point in time, really needs human control. And IHL also requires a direct link between the decisions and intentions of commanders and the outcomes of an attack. So we feel strongly that new principles that governments need to come together to agree must focus primarily on human control over the critical functions of these machines. And by critical functions, we mean the ability, the functions which can target and attack. And the reason that this is so important is also because it is not machines which are accountable to IHL. It is not machines that have to be law-abiding. It is humans who are accountable to IHL, and it is humans who have responsibilities, both state and individual obligations under IHL. So I want to turn now to operating principles as we're beginning to see them emerge. And this means that the crux of this whole question, and every panelist has said this so far, the crux of these questions around autonomous weapons and AI is a question of relationship. The relationship between humans and machines, the relationship between the human and the machine. And in our view, this needs human control over the critical functions of the machine. And therefore, we're recommending 3 principles to start state discussions and really push in this area. The first is the predictability of the machine. The second is the reliability of the machine. And the third is human supervision and the ability to intervene after activation. Now, happily at the moment, if we look around, we see that this is mostly the case in these weapons at the moment. They do have human supervision, they do have humans in the loop. I want to finish by thinking about the ethical aspects of this. And there is a lot of public anxiety about these weapons. And that is a good sign, because very often when we feel uncomfortable about something morally, that is an important prompt of what the Martins Clause in IHL calls the public conscience. And we have to respect that public conscience. People all over the world are saying there's something that worries us about these weapons, there's something that is troubling. And when I was preparing to come to Raisina and come to India and talk here, I went back and I read the great spiritual text of the Bhagavad Gita. And that, of course, is a text which starts in a moment of war. And there were two incidents that leapt out at me when I read the text again. And the first one, of course, is the famous incident of the beginning of the Bhagavad Gita, when the great warrior Arjuna, that both armies are lined up, and he leads his chariot out and sits in his chariot in the middle, and he looks in front of him at the opposing army, and he sees fathers, brothers, sons, teachers, grandfathers. And he's overcome by compassion. And he's a great bowman, Arjun. And his bow drops from his hand, and his mind reels. Now, it seems to me that that is an important moment of autonomous humanitarian pause. And that is crucial to human beings and to human control. Can we rely on those weapons to have moments of autonomous humanitarian pause? And the second thing, after he's decided to fight, or been persuaded by Krishna, of course, he then, there's a huge battle, and he comes across Bhishma. Now, Bhishma is the greatest of all warriors, and he has been made inviolable. He cannot be killed and destroyed, except at the moment when he chooses. That is the gift they gave him. And at a certain point in that battle, at the height of the battle, when he's covered in arrows and pierced all over, he decides that the moment has come. And he decides to turn his mind from war, and he decides to die. And therefore, that is a moment, if you like, of an autonomous humanitarian deactivation. How can we rely on these weapons to have that ability to have a humanitarian deactivation? So those are the questions I think are ethically posed, and our autonomy is precious, and we don't want to give it away too easily. And under law, we cannot give it away. So we have to, in our view, find a way to keep human control over these critical functions of these machines. Thank you.